Penny will be there to facilitate you getting your question answered. And when you ask the question, Penny will watch for you, and then she will open the floor up to you. So she might say, hey, Donald, I hear you've got a question. And so go ahead and ask your questions, unmute yourself and ask your question. Then Donald, you'd have an opportunity to ask your question and then remute yourself. So are there any questions right now as to the process? Here we go. We got another person joining. So that's the process. So if you have a question, Janice, as you're joining here, I hope you're hearing me. Janice, as you're joining, because I know this is your first time, if you have a question, type it into the chat box or raise your hand, and Penny, our school administrator, will be watching for that. All right. So we're going to talk a little bit about the Loire Valley and the two wines we have, which I've been enjoying over the last few days. I don't know how many of you prepared by drinking or will be drinking, but I have been drinking these over the last few days. And I'm going to go ahead and share my screen, and we're going to get started on this fun area. So look at that. I still don't even know how to do this all very well yet, but we have a cover page now. Oh my gosh, what a concept. So this is our Wines at Home, and this is our Sip with a Somm at Home Tasting Club. All right, so let's look at your map that you got if you downloaded it. If you didn't download it, it's on the club page for you, and you're welcome to go get that and download it anytime you want. But for those of you who did, you may have a printout, and we're looking at the map. This is the map. I'm here. I'm going to use my cursor. This part of France is what we're looking at here, the Loire Valley. And then if you look at it more closely, here's that section pulled away right here. And both of our wines from today happen to be from this section, number 3, right here. And that's Touraine. And that little map is right down here, pulled away. It's a lot of detail because this is quite a big wine region. As you can see over here on the main area of France, it's one of the largest. It spans certainly one of the largest areas. And what's interesting about this region is the wines that come out of it. There are quite a few different grapes that grow in the area, but the thing that is in common with all the grapes in this area is they have their lightness. They're pretty light, and they're also very acidic because this is a relatively cool region. If you look here at France, I don't know if you are familiar with this, but Champagne is very, very cold as a region. In fact, they have a hard time making their grapes get ripe. Do we have anybody in the queue? Let me see if I better check that. Oh, how do I check that while I'm here? This is what I need to figure out. Let me see. Yes, okay. So this is actually relatively cold as a region, even further north than Burgundy. It's about the same latitude as Chablis, which is a cool region. So these wines don't get very ripe, and we're going to have a good illustration a little later what happens with wines, with grapes, based on where they're grown in terms of their ripeness and what tends to be the predominant aromas and flavors out of them. So this is the Loire Valley, and we're moving into, in fact, here's that fun little diagram that I pulled off of Wine Folly that I just love and highly recommend you guys use it as a resource. So as you can see here, and what this is talking about is the less ripe a Sauvignon Blanc grape has, the less ripeness it has, the less sugar that has gotten into the grape via the sun as it has gotten ripe, it's going to taste more like lime. Then it will, boy, I am at a loss as to what those next two fruits are. That's horrible. Help me. I'm thinking that's not a pomegranate. This is crazy. I obviously know this is like a nectarine or a peach, but boy, will you guys help me out on that? I am having a problem with that. Penny, if you
Maybe it's a fig.
Yeah, it could be.
The fig.
this one or the green or
The purple one.
fig. That would be very interesting. A fig, or is it
Sweet, yeah. But then again, it says
passion fruit?
Yeah, it's probably guava or passion fruit or lychee, something like that.
Okay. Does anybody else? I mean, yeah, I think this one doesn't passion fruit. Isn't it purple?
Passion fruit is what Mike and Karen are saying.
Okay.
The purple one, yeah, I think I agree.
The purple one, and then this one. I mean, I realized I put that up there thinking, oh, from lime to nectarine, and I didn't even look at the little fruits in the middle. But yeah, I think we've got passion fruit there, and then we've got this one, whatever anybody can come up with for that. Maybe that's lychee. You're right, Penny. I've never seen a lychee. Anyway, so these are the flavors, and so if you can imagine, your Sauvignon Blanc from a cool region is going to be limier than something from a warm region or warmer region, say in the Sonoma area or in Central Coast, something like that. So we're going to expect that we're going to get some lime out of this. So let's do our tasting. And I've got my white here, and I always fill my glass personally. Depends on the kind of day I've had. I often fill it to here. If it's been a bad day, it might get up to here. But if you fill it to below the fattest part of your glass, you're going to be able to swirl it without really risking spilling it all over the place. And of course, there are days where we don't care about swirling and we're just having fun drinking it. We don't care. But if you want to swirl your glass, you want to keep it slightly below that biggest, fattest, rounded part to make it easy to swirl. So swirling this up. So I went into the swirl before the sight. So our 5 S's again. First S is sight. So let's tip this away from ourselves and look at a white background. Now here in the light in my office here, I'm seeing actually some interesting warmer tones on the side of this, almost like a wet straw, not just a regular straw. It's a little darker than straw. And it looks, and then the center of it does have some color in it, where some whites, I don't ever see color in the center. I'm seeing some color in this. So it's a little bit of a warmer yellow than I typically see through my glass. So that's our sight. I don't see any bubbles or anything. So then our swirl that I was just talking about. And now our smell, scent, sniff. And I've let this warm up. I got it out of the refrigerator about 20-25 minutes ago. So it's a little warmer. So it's come up to the temperature I would want it at, because it'll lift those aromas up. And I'm definitely getting some nice lemon. I'm not getting a lot of lime. Is anybody getting a lot of lime? I'm surprised. I am getting that, yeah?
I was just gonna say, if they want to put it in the chat box, I'll yell out what people are getting.
And I'll admit our latest joiners. Welcome, you guys. So anyway, that's the smell.
Grapefruit we have.
Grapefruit's a good one. I always smell herbs on a Sauvignon Blanc as well. I always smell kind of some herby stuff.
Unripe peach from Darcy.
Unripe peach. Darcy, you have such a palate and such a nose. All right, that's our S. Our 4th is the sip. Let's take a sip. And then our 5th is savor or the finish. Wow. My mouth is watering so badly right now. That just got me right there, like I'd bitten into a Granny Smith apple for sure. Very nice, very not necessarily long-lived in my mouth, which you would expect in a Loire Valley wine because they're not super high in that density that comes with high alcohol. In fact, does somebody have, I have given away my wine. Apparently there weren't a lot of bottles in the state. So, so I took my glasses, I've given some away. Will someone let me know what the alcohol percentage is on this one? I don't have it in my notes. If you'll look at your, 12.5. Okay, 12.5. Okay, great. So that makes sense. This is a little bit in the middle to low. It's not up there in the 13.5%. So it's going to stay lighter in our mouths and be gone quicker. Thank you, guys. Okay, so let's talk a little bit more about this wine because it's got an interesting piece to it that, and there might be some people out there with, and I avoided this one, although it's a fabulous wine. The Pouilly-Fumé, the Régis Menet Pouilly-Fumé. I stayed away from that one because it was over our budget of $25. It was $30. But if you're drinking that, you're going to be getting similar character. It's going to be probably a more complex experience, and you might find other aromas and flavors in the glass that we're not finding because Sancerre is a little more refined. They'll produce a little more refined Sauvignon Blanc in that area than the general Touraine region that we're examining right now. Let us know if you're drinking that, if that's what you're finding. So this wine has been aged on the lees, and you may see that in other on labels and things. And so I wanted to show you a little bit about that. I'm going to share my screen again. Okay, so actually, let me talk to you about the importer before we go into the lees. So Jenny and Francois Selections is the importer, and I want to talk, I try to highlight the importers when you guys have these bottles in front of you, because it really does make a difference to know the importer, because they have their own sense of wine, their own taste. And if you find an importer you like, it's almost always indicative of finding other wines from that importer that you might enjoy as well. So Jenny and Francois, they've been importing wines since 2000. This right here, this woman right here is Jenny, and she and Francois used to be married. They got divorced in 2013, and she bought him out of the business. And what they specialize in, and what she now specializes in, is natural wines. And we've had at least one class on natural wines. People are very curious about them. And what that means is I found this selection, or their bullet points basically of what they thought of as natural wines as a very good overview. So there were no synthetic molecules used in the vine. They used plowing or other solutions to avoid any chemical herbicides. They used indigenous yeast. Now that means they're not introducing any yeast when they are making their wine. Oftentimes, well, all the time, our fruit products will have natural yeast that are on the outsides of the skins. And the ones that are included that are as a part, they're on the skin, in the grape, on the grape, in the vineyard, those are indigenous yeast. Oftentimes when the grapes are brought in and the grapes are squeezed, the winemaker, if they're not interested in doing something naturally, they will introduce yeasts that will begin eating the sugar in the juice. And by introducing the yeast, there is less that can go wrong in the wine. Because when you introduce yeast, what you've done is you've actually cultivated, or you've purchased yeast that is specifically designed for what you want it to do. So for example, if you, and I'll use I won't use a Sauvignon Blanc as an example, I'll use, say, a Zinfandel. Zinfandel can get, as you know, very, very high in alcohol. And some yeast, many indigenous yeasts that may be on the skin of a Zinfandel grape, they would die in the vat of juice before all the sugar is eaten, because the yeast aren't able to, to live past, let's just say, 14% alcohol. Well, many Zinfandels can get up to 15.5. And so the winemaker will introduce a yeast that is able to live longer at high percentages of alcohol. So that is what happens when you can introduce a non-indigenous yeast. In this case, Jenny and Francois use indigenous yeasts. And so these are just what is there on the grapes. They hand pick their grapes. There is low to no filtering. So they're often a little bit cloudier than than filtered wines. And I have a feeling that's one of the reasons this is a little bit darker in its, or warmer, peachier in its color than our more normally filtered Sauvignon Blancs. Low to no sulfites, and sulfites are naturally present in grapes, so you can't ever get rid of sulfites. But what they would be saying here is the winemaker is not introducing sulfites. And you'll see that in white wines, that's probably another reason this is a little darker. Sulfites are used to keep the wine clear and bright and not orange. And you would, they use a lot of sulfites on, say, a salad bar and things that are having to sit out a long time, fruit and vegetables salad that has to stay out a long time, because then the fruit doesn't brown. So that's the same thing with not adding sulfites to the wines, is the wine may discolor. And that actually, probably more than the filtering, that might be why this is a little warmer looking than normal. Winemaking that respects the grape. Respect the grape. No pumping or rough handling. Basically, they're trying to really honor the steps from the vineyard into the winemaking. And then no chaptalization. Chaptalization is when you add sugar. If your grape juice doesn't squeeze into a, and it's not got enough sugar for the yeast to eat, some areas allow for chaptalization, which means you can add sugar to it to then lift the sugar content of the juice so the yeast has something to eat, and it creates the alcohol in the wine, which obviously is what you need in wine. But in this case, they don't allow, Jenny and Francois selections doesn't allow chaptalization. So that's what that is and what that means. So that's natural wines. So they also, in this winery, do something called sur-lie aging, which means aging on the lees. Sur-lie is upon the lees in French. And the lees, as you can see in this photo here, the lees are the dead yeast cells that have eaten the sugar in the juice, and then they have died in the juice itself. And sometimes the winemaker will choose to rack the wine off the dead yeast cells, pull it off so that it doesn't sit there on those dead yeast cells. But in this case, this is a Sauvignon Blanc that has been aged on the lees. And I'll be able, from another story, I know all of you have had sparkling wine and champagne, and those wines are, gosh, almost 100% aged on the lees for an amount of time, which means they sit there on those dead yeast cells, usually in the bottle, not in the barrel, for in the case of champagne. And what that's doing is those dead yeast cells, I mean, yeast is the same thing that we use to make bread. So when those dead yeast cells, when those yeast cells die, they end up giving off a nutty, bready kind of aroma and flavor. And they also add a softness or a richness to the wine. So if you see Sur Lie or aging on the lees, the wine will often have a softer, slightly nuttier approach in your mouth than just a normal wine of that region or area. Part of what I'm thinking happened here is because they can't use a lot of a manipulation to the natural wine, the fact that they needed to age this on the lees makes me think that probably it was a very, the grapes were only just ripe. And so they needed to create more of a depth of flavor and create a little bit less of that acidic experience. And so they decided to age it on the lees. So I'm just guessing at that. So let's see. I'm gonna go, here we go, stop share. There we go. How are we doing on questions, Penny?
I have one question about the chaptalization. Is it, let's see, M. Adams, wherever you are, wants to know, is that the same as when a wine says fortified?
Oh, M. Adams, you're welcome to unmute. That's a great question. And who is that? Who are you? Let's see.
Let's see who that is.
I see.
Oh, there they are. Yep.
Hi.
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 All right. So is this Mike?
Mark.
Mark. Hi, Mark.
Hi.
So chaptalization is different than fortification, and that's a great question because it kind of has that same kind of. I can see why you went there because so many fortified wines are sweet. So that would be like adding the sugar to the vat. So no, what they do, I'll go back to just, I'll look at fortified wines. Fortified wines are, so the grapes come in, they get squeezed. There is sugar in the wine or in the juice as the yeast start to eat the sugar. And then the winemaker will add a spirit, brandy, wine spirits, grape spirits, excuse me, into the vat. And what it does is it increases the alcohol to such an extent that all those yeast cells die, and it leaves sweetness because they haven't had a chance to eat all the sweetness in the wine, and it increases the alcohol because they've added brandy, for example. So that's why a port is like 20% alcohol instead of the normal 12 to 13, 14% for a wine. Chaptalization is you've got a vat here of wine, of juice, and it is so Granny Smithy, it's so acidic that there's not enough sugar in there for those yeast cells to eat enough of the sugar to bring the alcohol up to actually qualify the juice as wine eventually. So especially in Germany, there are areas that allow chaptalization because they will add sugar to that juice in order to get the juice sugary enough to create enough alcohol to then sell it as wine. So does that answer your question?
Yeah, thank you. And then if you can hear me, just to
Yes.
follow up. So why would somebody introduce a different yeast? Is it just because the yeast that they're introducing might be faster than the natural yeast?
So that's one of the reasons. Faster yeast, more regulated yeast. So it's not, if as you can imagine, if you're just doing on what wild yeast happen to be on the grapes when they come in, those are completely uncontrolled grapes, and they could start fermenting at a lower temperature than you expected, stop fermenting at all sorts of different temperatures, and you don't know the percentage of what's on that grape. So it's much more risky to use the indigenous yeast than it is to just introduce some that are cultivated at a specific point.
And is that somehow disclosed on the label, or is it just kind of common practice?
It's not disclosed on the label for the most part. At least with organic or biodynamic wines, they would have to use organic yeast cells to introduce. But generally, anything, unless they're organic or biodynamic, you would not know what kind of yeast have been used.
Okay, thank you.
You're welcome. Nice to talk to you. Okay, any other questions, Penny?
I've answered a couple of them.
Okay.
Let's see. Paul said, what kind of vats do they use? It looks like aging in oak. So he's wondering if they use wood, stainless, or concrete.
Thank you very much, Joel. No oak. Oh, this was Paul? Excuse me, Paul, hi. Hey, good to see your name come across. That was fun. Paul, no, interestingly, no oak on this, but good eyes thinking that because of the color and that you would think this was aged in oak. It's all aged in stainless steel. So there is no oak on this. The orange part is probably, like we were talking about, aging on the lees, and also the fact that they didn't use any sulfites. So the color can get discolored a little bit more quickly than a wine that has sulfites added that is going to be preserved through the sulfites. All right.
Do you know if the Pouilly Fumé is aged on the lees?
I don't know that.
Tara was asking that. Okay, I'll see if I.
Okay, Penny, thank you for looking at that. Yeah, I don't know that one. Okay, so then food with this wine. Fish, obviously, beautiful sole, as we've suggested. But then because it's a Sauvignon Blanc and it has that herbal character to it, oftentimes something that's very hard, like an artichoke or asparagus, or some kind of zucchini and squash medley off the barbecue with herbs on it, that's just hard to pair with a normal wine. And so a Sauvignon Blanc is one of the ones that are often gone to for a pairing that doesn't fight with the herbalness of the dishes that I've been talking about. Yeah. Has anybody had any of the food with, I had some Mexican food last night. I splurged and we went out and bought, like curbside delivery of some Mexican food because I was just craving it. But, and it went fabulously with my chili verde. So it had those herbs in it, but also a little bit of spice and just the white pork. So it wasn't a heavy meat. So it was really nice with the corn tortillas. Anybody else have any experience with food on this?
Yes, Darcy had marinated grilled artichokes on the rosemary French bread. And then Nancy sort of went your same route. She did turkey chili with green chilies, and it was perfect with that.
Oh yeah, awesome. That's perfect. I mean, Sauvignon Blanc is one of those ones that I often will pull out not knowing what I'm going to cook yet, because it almost goes with almost everything. It's just such a great pairing wine. All right, great. Thanks, guys. Okay, let's go on to the next one. Yeah.
So I'm sort of comparing, I have the rosemary bread and the artichokes are great. The chopped olives, not as great, almost too rich. The wine doesn't quite cut through the butteriness, but the grilled artichokes marinated are just enough balance to that grapefruit note. And my question early on in the chat is, can you comment a little bit on vinegar with wine. So in so many things, whether it's a salad dressing or so forth, I had to hold myself back and not like put a splash of vinegar to make it brighter or something. So can you comment a little bit about, I wouldn't with the little appetizer that I'm having, but with the next dish that I made to have with the red, I'm just dying to put balsamic vinegar all over it, but holding back. So in general, with either of the wines or ongoing, how does vinegar affect your palate when you're tasting wine?
Yeah. Thank you, Darcy. I love these detailed questions. So fun.
I'm into the food and wine part. The technical making wine part, I'm like, but I want to know how it works with the food. And that is very amazing chemistry as well. So I would like to know more.
Yes, it is. So one of the most fascinating things to me in regards to high acid like a vinegar with a high acid like a Sauvignon Blanc is they actually, if they are balanced, they almost cancel out the acidity and they soften each other. What these wines from this area, in fact, I would be so curious if you decided to do that balsamic vinegar, because the red, like the wines in this region are actually touted as good with vinegar-based dishes. So that is really cool, and I'd love to hear what your thoughts are as we get into the red.
I'm ready.
I don't know if all of you know Darcy, but she is the cheesemonger and runs Nosh at the market at Park City. So she knows cheeses and chutneys and meats and all sorts of fun things. And this kind of question, I love going into the detail on this. So tell me how that works, because literally all of these wines are touted as going with the vinegary based.
I'll do it both ways, because I have a dish. I couldn't get the bistro hamburger dish off of Epicurious for some reason. It said it wasn't there anymore. So I had a little bit of leftover from last night, and what I did was I put a bunch of greens in it for the spinach aspect. So I kind of have a combination of the two things. So, you know, we're all cooking from our pantry, and so I'll play with that, and I'll try it before, and then also with a drizzle of balsamic. I have a good aged balsamic, so that'll be fun.
Awesome. Okay, let us know. Okay, so let's move on to our Bourgogne. The fact that they say Bourgogne out of that long word is so funny to me. And I'm going to say the Domaine de la Chantellerie. I looked it up and I couldn't find out how to pronounce that. So that is what we're going to, the red. It's our Cab Franc, and you may, this has been such a strange thing. The Cab Francs that are available in Utah are almost none. Many of you may have had trouble even finding this. And so I put down what was a similar priced, completely different area, but from Chile. We just did Chile last week, and there was a Cab Franc from the Maule Valley down there. If anybody has that one, you know, raise your hand as we go through this. You've got that one? Okay.
Yeah.
So we'll see how you guys like it with this. It's going to be a warmer take on it, probably closer to dark fruits than red fruits, but let's see what you think. So let's take a sip of this. Let me go back to, I'm going to share my screen again. Oops, let me go back. Okay, here we go. Okay, so we're going back to, here we get back in the France area. You know, obviously here's Loire. Here is our area that we're looking at again. Here's Touraine, Touraine. Oh my goodness. And then down here is that area all mapped out. But here in the bottom left corner of, let me look back at my pronunciation, Touraine, is the Bourgogne and Chinon area. And both of these will produce Cab Francs for the most part. And Cab Franc is an interesting grape. It is the parent. Oh, come back. There we go. It is the parent of both Cabernet Sauvignon and Merlot. It's one of the parents of both of those. So here's another beautiful Wine Folly, God bless them, Wine Folly illustration. And you can see that they're calling out strawberry, although I have seen raspberry called out more often than strawberry. They've got the roasted pepper, and you guys, it's such a funny thing. Apparently lately I've had this penchant for that the pyrazines in wine. And I have been serving a lot of those to you guys and making you taste a lot of them. So this also has the peppery flavor that we've had in the last few wines. Plum, gravel, and they're calling out chili pepper. I've also seen a lot of wines that are Cab Francs that are called out by pencil shavings. And be curious if you guys are getting pencil shavings from this, because I actually get a lot of pencil shavings. And then you can see down here about the color that they're suggesting you might find. And if we look at that, you're looking at it. Mine's a little, as I'm in the light here, mine is a little bit, I would call it a little bit more pink than their color right there. And then they have the flavor profile as a medium on the fruit, body weight medium, and then tannin as a medium high, acidity, like we've just talked about, a medium high, and then alcohol is back at the medium category. So this wine is Cab Franc. Love this wine. Kermit Lynch. Now here's the importer that brings this in. And again, Kermit Lynch is a very good importer. And so if you see this logo on the wine bottles, consider it. If you like more, I'd say they specialize in European, very nice, elegant wines is what I would say, or also typical for that region. They try to go for a very defined and cultivated taste from each region. So I love Kermit Lynch. And then this is a picture of Christine and, oh boy, Terry, I'm going to call that Bocard. And they are the owners of this winery. The Bocard family has been producing wine at this winery since 1822. So very long-lived family there. And in this area, they have a word for Cabernet Franc, which is Breton. Breton. They call it Breton. Now, I could not find the reason for that, but that's what they call it in the area. And I literally have, so Darcy, I literally have, to answer your question, notes here that I added. High acidity compare with tomatoey and vinegar-based sauces. So that was right from the my research, in addition to what was on your notes from today. Let's see, what else do we have for you here? That's it on that. So I will stop sharing. Have you guys been tasting while I've been talking?
Yes, they have.
Of course you have. Is anybody else getting pencil shavings? I'm just, as you guys know, I've admitted to not being the best of noses and palates. But of all the things, I think of my little zipper bag in my binder when I used to go to elementary school, and I just unzip that and I put my nose in here and I think, yeah, I'm back in 3rd grade with all my pencils. So it's just super pencil shape.
Yes, people are agreeing. A couple people are getting that same smell too.
So then the question is, what are we going to do with that? Because oftentimes the aromas in a wine will help lead you down a path that will help you pair something. And I'm thinking to myself, maybe a smoked dish would go well with this. I would take because of the kind of smoky, leady kind of aromas. That would be something that I'd look at, a smoky kind of thing, maybe a barbecue with vinegar sauce. You know, like more of the Carolina kind of vinegary barbecue sauce than the, tomatoey, but even the tomatoey would work. But maybe not the sweet of, say, a Texas. I wouldn't go sweet. I would go vinegary on this.
I would say with the vinegar, it brings out a lot more fruit in the wine. So I don't know the chemical aspect of what's happening there, but so the dish that I prepared, I changed it up because it needed more flavored when I first made it. We ended up adding tomato juice to it, but these are the leftovers or tomato sauce. And so this was kind of the base, and I started differently and I added more garlic to it. So the garlic was completely different, and I have the Chilean wine, so there could be some differences there. But then when I try it with sort of hamburger, let's call it a goulash with spinach and arugula sauteed into it.
Darcy, we're losing you.
Cutting it out.
Unfortunately, Darcy, we're losing you. I can't, it's cutting out. I'm not sure whether it's mine or yours. Penny, is everybody losing Darcy, or is it just me?
No, I think we all are. Yeah.
Okay. Shoot. Okay. Thank you, Darcy, if you can still hear us. So her comment was that it brought out the fruit in the wine, that the balsamic vinegar actually then allowed her to taste the fruit in the wine more. And sometimes that acid would be softened, and that's what we talked about, where right now when I don't have any food with me, I'm tasting a lot of the acid in this wine, where the vinegar would kind of cancel out that acid and allow me to taste more of the grape flavors in this. So that doesn't surprise me if that's what ultimately you were talking about, Darcy. All right, so this is one of the grapes that we see in the region of Bordeaux, France. This is one of the 5 grapes that they can use there in their wine. And if you're looking at Bordeaux, there's a left bank from the river and a right bank. And the right bank is more Merlot, Cab Franc. The left bank is more Cabernet, Cab Franc, and Merlot. So mostly Cabernet. So if you've got a left bank, you're going to mostly have Cab Franc, Cabernet Sauvignon and Cab Franc, some Merlot. If it's right bank, it's going to be Merlot and Cab Franc for the most part. So Cab Franc figures in a big way into the Bordeaux region of France and helps those wines have a lot of complexity to them. So food-wise, we had this spinach and goat cheese, and I saw, June, I did see your suggestion on grilled eggplant. That sounds great. That would get that smoky character into the that sponginess of the eggplant, and that would be great. I also feel like you'd want to add some kind of a sauce, maybe even a little bit of a tomatoey sauce with that eggplant. This would go well with that as well. So are we questions on the Cab Franc, our Bourgogne Cab Franc?
Not yet.
Okay.
We've had some different pairings. Joel once did a tasting for the vice president of McDonald's. He had to do a pairing, and he paired this with a Big Mac.
Joel, that is Perfect.
It was actually very funny because it was a business group in LA, and they had the vice chair of McDonald's speaking, and they said, we want to do a wine tasting with McDonald's foods. And I said, okay, that'll be interesting. So I immediately grabbed, I went and I got a Big Mac and one of everything. I hadn't eaten McDonald's in 20 years. And I got like a Cab and a Bordeaux, and they totally, what you realize is a Big Mac is kind of flavorless. I mean, they're really kind of mild and nothing. And so when we played around, the Bourgogne was the only thing that really worked with a Big Mac. So if you ever have to eat a Big Mac, get a Bourgogne.
I wonder if it was the pickle. There's a pickle on a Big Mac, isn't there? So that would be like that vinegary, salty kind of thing that would throw off the other ones. Oh my goodness, what a great story.
By the way, we did a Grand Cru Chablis with French fries. That works too.
Wow. Okay. A
It was a
Grand
very
Cru
funny
with
night.
French. I wish I could have seen the tables. Did you do this at McDonald's or was this
Oh,
in the office?
No, we took over the Century City McDonald's. I had everybody who worked at the McDonald's in black tie. It was the funniest wine
that's
tasting
great.
event of all times.
Yes. Oh, Brooke Hayford says, I may work the fries and Chablis. I love it. Okay, guys. Well, what we're going to do now, if no questions and if we're all good, is we're going to start this section. I don't know if you saw this, but in our notes, we now have wine on this side and then the number of thumbs up on the other. So you can keep track of the wines you've tasted and would you buy it again? So that's the question for those of you who haven't been on before is you give me a thumbs up, and down at the bottom of your screen, there's a band of, commands down there. And if you see one, it says usually on the right, it says reactions. And if you click it, you'll see either a clap or you'll see a thumbs up. So what I'd like you to do is we're going to start with the Sauvignon Blanc, and it's the Gaspard. And those of you who have the substitute, the alternative, please don't vote, okay? Don't vote if you have the alternative. But we're talking about the Gaspard Sauvignon Blanc from Touraine. I'd like to see a show of thumbs up for those of you who'd buy this again. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12. I think I got everybody. Jean and Janice, I can't see your faces or hands. So, okay, we got a good showing on that. And that's our Sauv Blanc. And then let's go to our Cab Franc. So take your fingers down. Yeah. Okay, great. And so let me see a show of hands for those of you who would buy this, the Cabernet Franc again. Woohoo. Gosh, great. And thank you. I'm sorry that all of you couldn't try this. This has really been an interesting puzzle to solve as I get into this try to make sure there's enough in the state for everybody. And I have failed in some cases marvelously. So next week, we are going to compare Oregon and Washington. And I was going to look for a red wine to do that with, but I was going to do a Syrah. I really wanted to do an Oregon Syrah versus a Washington Syrah. We just don't have the selection in Utah for that. So what I did is I went over to the Riesling section, and we are going to be comparing a Willamette Valley, Oregon, Riesling. I have selected Willamette Valley Vineyards. So it's actually Willamette Valley Vineyards Riesling. And on the back of many Rieslings, they've become very smart, and they are starting to put a sliding scale of how sweet it is. And so we're gonna learn an interesting trick next week as well on Rieslings and other wines that have a variability of their sweetness. But this one, here's the scale on the back of that. And so you can see they're calling it medium sweet in there. Okay, so that's the Oregon. The Washington, Columbia Valley, Washington, is going to be Cold Creek Vineyard Chateau Ste. Michelle Riesling. And you will see on this scale, it is in the middle between medium dry and medium sweet. So I was trying to get two Rieslings that were close together so that we're not going back and forth between a dry Riesling and an off-dry Riesling. And so we're going to learn a lot about Riesling and why it is really one of the most, if you ask Psalms what wine they would pair with a lot of different foods, many Psalms would choose a Riesling, and it's one of a Psalm's favorite go-to wines, and we're going to talk about why that is. So you're going to have all sorts of different foods next week to be able to pair with this when we put out our PDF. So that should be up by Wednesday or Thursday of this week, that informational PDF on the Rieslings. So thanks, you guys. Cheers. Have a lovely evening. And another Sip with a Psalm is completed. So enjoy. Ciao.